Hey, and welcome back. So previously, I discussed the concept of a single global internet and the vital role of cybersecurity within it, right? Um, we talked about cyber law, little, not really necessarily privacy, but cyber law, business, geographical implications based on one's location, um, and a couple of other things. Today we'll take a deeper look into like policies and regulations that basically stem from those cyber laws that we talked about, and ultimately, these policies and regulations are then typically consolidated into like standards and compliances for companies to adopt within those different countries. So last time we didn't necessarily talk about like go further like deep in depth about what the cyber laws were, but we just basically introduced what cyber law was, what cybersecurity was, and why it even exists. So if you haven't checked that video out, go check it out. I think it's pretty decent. I hope it's pretty decent. But now let's just go ahead and go to this video, which is basically regulations, policies, and standards. And I'm gonna give like a quick disclaimer out here, which is basically regulations, policies, and standards are not the most thrilling subjects. They are boring to me. However, I'm basically bringing up these topics to give you a better understanding of why such cybersecurity is important and basically how it works with cyber law. A very high level overview. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm not anybody that's like diving deep into cyber law and policies. I'm not a governance and compliance person. But the fact that as an AppSec engineer, I have to deal with these things and I have to have an understanding of their existence and how they coexist with cyber law and how they impact the company. So I have to familiarize myself. And so I'm going to familiarize you in the same way I'm familiar with it. So, like I said, it's not the most thrilling thing, but I do want to stress the importance of adopting basically a secure by design mindset, especially for your developer, because these things stem from this. It's a trickle down effect. Cyber law, policies, regulations, company standards, and then that spreads all out into secure coding practices and all these things that we're talking about in this 4-part series. So this is part 2, and we got 2 more to go. So like I said, as an AppSec engineer, like my primary focus is to collaborate with the dev teams and basically just give them the knowledge they need to combat these cyber threats. And if you really much haven't heard this before, it's basically my mission. My mission is to empower 1 million developers to secure their code one line at a time. I guess I'll get off my soapbox and let's hop into it. So, like we talked about before, cybercrime is a real issue. And to combat it, governments have enacted these cyber laws and legislation. And these laws vary by country and even can overlap due to like geopolitical factors. FYI, they also differ at the state and regional level in the United States. So just keep that in mind, because Texas is not the same as Georgia, and things of that nature. So these laws, basically, they have like this wide-ranging impacts on the governments, individuals, and business themselves. So speaking of businesses, we're going to dive into the Global Industry Classification Standard, or the GICS. Yes, I have to hesitate about that. And the GICS categorizes companies into different sectors and subsectors based on their business activities and operations. So basically, this makes it easier to understand the global economy. And if you've ever started a business, you know you have to like go within a certain industry and a sub industry, and so that's basically a part of that GICS. So While that's more typically relevant for like analysts and researchers, investors, business owners, we're gonna dive into it from basically a cybersecurity aspect. And so, what does that have to do with cybersecurity? Exactly. What it has to do, and I have to take a pause and I have to like lay it out there. So GICS, not GIS, GICS and cybersecurity. Um, just think about this. All information is not equal. The compromise of some data has a more significant impact, like negative impact, than others. For example, if someone hacks a company and retrieves an email address, that's one thing, right? But if somebody compromises the company and now the access to your bank account is there, your address, your social security number, and all your financial assets are just out there in the wild, that's a serious issue. So the imagine those being in two different sectors, right? Two different areas. So the protection levels and data handling of this information is based on the industry, it's based on the activities of the organization, and GICS. So the GICS, high level overview, if you have never heard of it or you're not familiar, it's basically like it includes 11 sectors. Some sectors, like for example, healthcare and financial, and those have more stringent government regulations and policies due to the fact that they handle sensitive data like personally identifiable information or PII and personal health information or PHI. So this is where legislation like, and I'm about to like bust out some the boring stuff, right? Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations of CFR Part 11 or HIPAA, Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act, or high tech is also one. So these are like three different things. So Title 21, HIPAA is another thing, Health Information Technology for economic and I think clinical health, high tech. Yeah, and high tech. Those things like they come into play, at least for the United States. Then you have privacy things. So like I said, I'm not gonna dive into all the different types of policies and regulations and all that, but I'm just letting you know that these things exist because the data is important. So if you're in Europe, or if you work with a company that's worked in Europe, you're probably familiar with the GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation. Yeah, a lot of this stuff I have like memorized, but the other stuff I'm like Anyway, it's widely regarded as like the premier legislation for like privacy and security around the globe, right? And basically a quick summary of it is this, and I'm gonna pull it up for me. Basically, these companies may only collect personal data if it has an integrity friendly purpose. It cannot be held just in case. Individuals must consent to their data being collected and can withdraw consent at any time or request the personal data that companies are holding on them. That's if you've ever gone anything, if you ever got on a VPN and you are acting like you're, I don't know, in Germany, and you're going somewhere else that's collecting data, you get that pop-up or something that says, hey, they're collecting your data. Are you okay with this? Or if you're on a website that just happens to be European, the European, like that pop-up also comes up, say, hey, are you okay with us collecting your data or whatever? Like, that's what we're talking about. Any data breach must be reported within 72 hours. Businesses are responsible for the data processing of their suppliers and stuff like that. So there's way more into that, but like that's just a quick overview of what's in the GDPR. So some Asian countries also have their own version of the GDPR. So does Mexico has its own law for the protection of personal data held by private parties. Canada and India as well. So in addition to some of those things involving the business, you also have like the privacy for based on age. So there are laws protecting individuals such as minors, like COPA, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which basically regulates how companies collect, use, and or disclose personal information from and about children. Because you got Roblox, you got VTech, which we're not gonna talk about VTech. If you know, you know. If you haven't, Google it. Google VTech hacks, and just be cautious because that goes in a specific child realm that is against the law. So just be mindful. Then you have Amazon's Twitch, because if you've been on Twitch, everybody named Mama on Twitch. So is Google's YouTube, and there's channels for kids on Twitch, and there's channels for kids on YouTube, and these are like home, like people are at home doing this. So that's something to be mindful of. Is it that these companies have to be mindful of that COPA Act. This also deals with like voice activated technology, if you haven't really thought about that. So if you have like some AI like Alexa or Google Assistant or Siri, companies have to take into account voice activation. That's data, that's information you're taking. If you're a parent and you're looking for new diapers, that has to be, customers want that. But as a company, you have to also take that into consideration. Is the child doing it? Is there a child account for it? And that's something to consider. So voice activated and AI powered devices also must adhere to this law or these laws. And this also includes like any other websites, companies with minors as their target market. So there are cybersecurity and governance teams dedicated to keeping these companies in compliance and testing against the safety and security controls in place. So, of course, if you've ever looked at a framework, if you've ever looked at a standard or like the laws and statutes, of course, not every single rule is going to apply to one single business in the industry. So, for example, let's say there is an e-commerce site that relies on a third party to collect payment. Well, they don't have to necessarily deal with payment compliance stuff or PCI compliance, because they basically redirect the customer to the third party. Say, Squarespace, PayPal, Stripe. Those are companies that would definitely have to adhere to PCI compliance because they're dealing with credit card information, banking information, things of that nature. So they'll have to, PayPal and Stripe would have to deal with those compliances and standards, whereas the company that utilizes that third party, they kind of offset having to deal with PCI compliance to a degree by saying, well, we don't deal with that. So we don't collect any type of that information. So, no need to test this. So, that's one example. So this is where we enter into the company standard. I'm gonna have a whole nother video on this because I think the company standard should be like a little bit more along the lines of like, I'll talk more about creating, what is it? When you basically dive into creating the employee handbook, like a lot of stuff from that. An employee handbook has a lot of the laws that kind of pertain to the company, like how the company wants you to act, and then there's things that the company specifically needs you to not do because, they they have to stay in compliance. So basically, when the company standards put in place, this is where the company like takes the rules and compliances, regulations, or things that are known as an industry standard, and then they adopt the ones that most align with their business, or that they have to fulfill at a minimum. So remember, there are 11 sectors in GICS, and then you break that down because there's so many subsets. There's like 164 subsets below the 11. And businesses rely on other businesses to handle certain aspects of their company as well. So there's not one successful business out there that's not collaborating with another in some way or fashion. At some point, they kind of overlap, which causes the mix of rules that we talked about earlier when it comes to like industry standard, well, not industry standard, but like the rules that the company takes on, or the standards that the company decides to like, you know, we're gonna pick and choose. This is ours, that's yours. This is ours, that's yours. And so this is where cybersecurity gets the most frustrating when you work for a company, because you just acquired a company, you were manufacturing, and now you have a software company, and now you have to pull in all the compliance that the software company had that you didn't have to worry about as a manufacturer. And so now, even though the business is separated, you as a person who works in IT or in security have to find a balance to say, okay, well, this is our standard acquired company, and this is your standard. And we got to bring you up here without compromising what your actual company standard or what applies to you at minimum. So, and then we also have to say, you know, create different subsets of rules for you. I mean, it's a thing. It's a thing. So if you've ever been in cybersecurity doing something like that, and you've been in a company that's acquired another business, man, like it's not fun, but it is also fun because you get to learn stuff. But anyway, that's where the overlap of rules comes, and it gets muddled, and because it has to keep up with not only cybersecurity has to not only keep up with the industry, the changes in the industry, because mind you, while people just living their life, running their business, working and stuff like that, there's somebody at home that's like, ooh, what does this button do? Like, you know, so they find a new attack vector, they find a new thing, or they just so happen to find a defect in the code or in the application. They're just like, oh, this just shows everybody's information. Let me slide this over to y'all and let y'all. That's happening, you know? So all this is happening simultaneously, and these changes are all happening at the same time. Not just for the industry, but at the company and the wild. So, but we'll talk about that. We won't go deep in the woods with that, but we'll talk about how companies tend to try to high level, right? We'll talk about how companies pretty much try to pick and choose what's best in alliance with them. But hopefully, you have a better understanding of the role of policies and regulations and how they and what role they play in the cybersecurity space. And if not, you know, here's the TLDL, or too long, don't listen. In a global context, a global internet context, cybersecurity, regulations, and standards, they play a role. Cyber laws vary by location, affecting governments, individuals, and businesses. Different, diving into the businesses, different sectors have distinct regulations. Sectors meaning industry sectors. So different industry sectors have distinct regulations, particularly in the sensitive data or the industries that handle a lot of sensitive data, such as healthcare and finance, and there's subsequent subsectors from that. Various regions across the world or countries across the world have specific privacy laws. They have policies and regulations that can differ based on age, data, and things of that nature. So the businesses need to adhere to first of all, they're industry standard for, you know, if they're finance, healthcare, stuff like that. But they also need to take into account the other businesses that they may interact with, making sure that you're working with a business that is also in compliance, because that's a thing. So again, cybersecurity has to adapt to all this. And laws change often, regulations change, because somebody's out there being hacky or playing around and stuff like that. So, and as I said in the previous conversation, it doesn't account for the cyber laws are for like historical data, like they're observations that have been made over time, and so a law has to put in place. So they're kind of proactive. Sometimes they're reactive, or excuse me, they're reactive. Sometimes they're proactive, but in most cases that we're working on now, they're reactive, and so we're trying to work towards a more proactive space. But in order to do that, you have to shift left, or this might be your left, but you have to shift left to be more reactive, proactive and less reactive. So we'll dive into that, because that's the mindset that we're ultimately trying to get to. And hopefully these videos are helping you to understand why it is, without saying the internet was made in 1981. Like, I don't know, you know. So I hope that helps, and I'll see you guys next time.